Very, 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 very important. And actually also very important to put on more salt than you think. Even though we're going to be putting teriyaki glaze on this and it's going to be quite, I guess, salty from that, you still need to salt the steak as well. Because the process that we're going to go through here is we're going to cook the steaks until they're pretty much nearly how we want them to be. Then we're going to, I don't know, we might add some garlic to it at that point, fry some garlic for a little bit, and then we're going to put our teriyaki glaze in there and reduce the glaze down, because you saw how liquid that was when it spilled out of the bottle. It's still very, very liquid, and you needed to reduce it in the pan, and that's how you concentrate the flavor. So how many times should you flip a steak in a pan? Who reckons lots? Who reckons once? I reckon it doesn't matter. Like, I truly do not think it matters. Like, if you listen to Heston Blumenthal, he's like, flip it every 30 seconds. You listen to Gordon Ramsay, he's like, flip it once in the pan. And I reckon both of those guys can cook a steak reasonably well. So if I've got a thick steak, I'll flip it more times so it cooks faster. This is the thing, the more times you flip a steak, the faster it'll cook. Because it means that the bottom of the steak, which you then flip over to be on the top, will then be hot. So you've got heat coming from the bottom and heat coming from the top. But you've got heat coming from both sides. So the more you flip the steak, the hotter the top of the steak is going to be. The more heat's going to be coming from both sides. So that what that means is it's just going to cook faster. Sometimes you want a steak to cook faster. Sometimes you want a steak to cook slower. If I have a very thin steak, I'll probably only flip that once, because I want it to be in the pan for as long as possible to get as much color on the outside. More important, really, than anything like that is just how much color did you get on the outside of that steak. And the way to achieve that is firstly get a pan that is physically heavy, because steaks have a lot of heat density, heat capacity. So if you put a steak into like a thin aluminium pan, the pan is just going to cool down straight away. Like, I've got 2 small steaks and that is all that I would cook in here. I wouldn't try to fit a third in there. I was even thinking, like, should I just do the one, because I want to have a lot of pan real estate so that the pan doesn't get too cool through that process. So I'm going to put a bit of oil into my pan. I've got some olive oil here, but I might actually use a bit of vegetable oil. I'm going to take it out of the deep fryer. So you notice I get the pan really hot first, like with no oil in it. Don't put oil in the pan. You don't put oil in a pan and heat it up. Every recipe, except for the ones that I write, says heat oil in a pan. You don't heat oil in a pan, because if you heat oil in a pan, the oil will start to smoke before the pan is at the right temperature. And the pan being at too low a temperature is how you get yourself into big problems. Genuinely big problems. Like, things will stick. Like, if you have a pan and you heat it up first and then you put the oil in the pan, things won't stick to that pan. Like, you can see now that the pan is hot. The oil moves in a completely different way around that pan. So then we can just put our steaks in. And they're going to take a little while to cook because they're quite thick. So while that's happening, maybe I'll move on to doing the karage, the chicken over here. Aaron, oh yeah, I should do that actually, because I'm going to marinate this chicken for a little while. Not a long time, just a little time. So I've got some chicken thigh cutlets here, one of my favorite cuts, because that is a chicken thigh fillet, but with the bones still in. Oh. And more importantly, with the skin still on it. So these are great for like putting in the oven and roasting and things like that. But most important in this process is the fact that it's got the skin on it, because you can't really make delicious fried chicken without the skin on the chicken. Trap for young players, I probably should have sharpened my knife a little bit better before I came. Knife, I get asked a lot actually by people, what sort of knife should I buy, or what's the best knife to buy? And the answer to that question is always a sharp one. Because more important, oh yes, we have a question, yes? What temperature do you want the pan to be? I should have showed you beforehand actually. So what you want, basically want it to be as hot as it can get.
Oh.
So when you take a little bit of water and you flick it onto the pan, you get what's called the lead and frost effect. You can Google that when you get home. But basically the water droplet, when it hits the pan, will skid across the top of it, make like a little squeaking sound. That's called the lead and frost effect. So that means the pan is so hot that the water will hit it, immediately turn into a little cushion of vapor and be like a hovercraft and skid across the top. That's how you know a pan's hot enough. So now I'm just looking at the steak on the top here. So I've just turned it once because I felt like it. I probably will need to cook that side a little bit more, but I'm looking for the color. The color is what's important at this point in cooking that steak. I'm just gonna take the bone out of these. You can cook karaage on the bone. It's just gonna cook a little faster off the bone, in my opinion. So I'm just gonna trim the bone out of that. And if you don't know how to debone a chicken, I do highly recommend like just looking on YouTube or something, because it's such a useful skill to have, and a cheap skill to have as well, because it means that you can buy whole chickens and debone them, which are a fraction of the price of buying all the bits and pieces separately. Any other questions while I'm just working my way through this? Yes, sir. At the back. In the pantry, it will last forever. I think the law probably means I need to put like a date on it or something, but it will last forever. You could come up to that in 10 years and it'd still be good. In fact, it'd be better. Because there's a thing called, so the thing that's turning this steak brown at the moment is called the Maillard effect, or the Maillard reactions. So they're the things that turn meats brown, etc. in a pan. It's also, anything that turns brown means you're getting extra umami or savory taste into it. And so that's really important. So, but they happen either at very high temperature, but they also happen at lower temperatures. They just take longer. So, for example, in a steak, like at 280 degrees, that steak is turning brown very, very quickly. It's that browning reaction is happening very quickly. It will also happen in a bottle of wine at room temperature or at 12 degrees over a period of years. When you age in wine, that's what's happening. Those low temperature Maillard reactions are actually reacting to give you a more savory or more rounded taste in the wine. It also will happen in a curry that you made and left in the pot or in the fridge until the next day. The flavor will develop in that, and then it literally, it's not like, why does this taste better the next day? It literally tastes better, like because it actually has developed flavor compounds that they weren't in there beforehand. Yes, ma'am, you had another question.
Yes. So when you cook the steak, what's the temperature for the fire?
Oh, what's the temperature of the fire?
High or?
Yeah, high. I mean, if it's looking like it's cooking too quick, I might turn it down a little bit, but this is still not cooked yet. So the way you test a steak is you stick your finger into it. So you just poke your finger into it and it feels soft. If it feels soft, it's not cooked enough. So that piece was a lot thinner than this piece, so I'm just sticking my finger into that one. That feels good. I'm going to leave that there. This one still has a little bit to go. So now that I've taken one steak out of the pan, I might actually turn the pan down just a little bit. Normally you can just stay on quite high heat, but I'm going to I'm just going to leave it. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but if it starts to, they did ask me how much smoke is going to happen in this demonstration because they haven't turned off any of the smoke alarms here, so we'll see how that goes. I mean, if the pan's starting to get too hot, so that pan's very hot right now, but it's just, I don't have a lot of control on this stove. So I can actually move the pan off the heat for a little bit, just to cool down a little bit, and then move it back. Like, there's lots of different ways to control stuff. This pan is going to hold a lot of heat, so I don't mind moving it off the heat for a little bit. Another question at the back there. You work here. It sounds like I set up all these questions, but I literally haven't.
Just curious to know, how long would you rest the meat for?
So the rule of thumb in resting a steak is that you want to rest it for about half the amount of time that you cooked it. To me, you can almost not rest it enough, ever.
Oh.
Like, I'll rest a steak for ages, and some people get scared about that because the steak's going to go cold. That is true to an extent. However, one thing you can do is just put the steak back in the pan after it's rested. So that steak, I can leave that for 20 minutes, half an hour and let it go quite cold. And then just put it back into the pan. Like if I'm having barbecue at home, I'll cook steaks on the barbecue, just put them onto the side, make sure nobody touches them, slap their hands away when they try and touch them, and then when it's actually time to eat, after about 15 minutes of resting, I'll throw them back onto the barbecue, get that nice kind of crust on the outside of it, and they'll be delicious steaks. But resting is so important for not just steaks, but literally everything. Like rest to roast chicken, rest to roast lamb, rest just about anything you cook. I'll rest this chicken here that after I'm finished deep frying it. So I'm going to cut this chicken into some pieces, bite-sized pieces. One thing about Asian cooking, particularly East Asian cooking like Japanese, Chinese, Korean, is that we eat with chopsticks. So therefore, you need to think really long and hard about how you're going to cut something, because